So getting our camera to track an object is super easy. If we wanted our camera to track this cube, down here in our camera menu, we would just press track selected with that cube selected, and when we do, you see that now the camera is following it. So if I were to say click F to insert a keyframe for this cube, which also moves down my timeline a second, and then move it, press F again, move it, press F again. So I've got like 4 keyframes or so. We can see the camera tracking the cube. So that's great, but what if we had something else going on in this scene, and at a certain time we wanted the camera to start following it rather than the cube? So say for instance we had press Shift A and add a monkey, tap W a few times, S to scale just to make it look a little more presentable. And I'll press 5 to go into top view, R to rotate, Control to constrain, and I'm just going to have this monkey facing this cube, move it back here, and with my current frame on 0 here, press F to insert a keyframe, and then maybe go ahead and right click and move this down to the 3rd second there, G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and press F here. Now we've got this Suzanne head coming in here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is flesh this animation out a little bit by mirroring this animation. So to do that, with all these frames selected here, I'm going to press T to bring up my tool shelf, and under the animation tab, just click mirror. And regardless of wherever your timeline indicator happens to be, this mirror function will just mirror all the frames that happen to be selected. So if we press back to go all the way back, and we press play, we can see this complete animation now. And I'm going to go ahead and click back on my Sensei tab. Whenever we have an object selected, and down here in our camera menu we press track selected, what happens is a tracking constraint is added to our camera. So if I click on the camera right now, and under the constraints tab, we see this track 2 here. And basically what happens is when you press track selected, this constraint modifier is added, and the object you happen to have selected out in the 3D view is chosen as the target. And then the proper tracking axes are given to the tracking constraint to make sure that it works properly. But you'll also notice this influence value here, which we have control of that down here where it says constraint. If we drop this constraint all the way down to 0, and then we hold Shift and middle mouse to try to move around, we're able to freely do that. However, if we put this influence back up to 1 and we try to pan around the screen, we can't really do that. We're restricted to just rotating around the object that the camera is tracking. So if we want to track multiple objects, what we need to do is manually add another track 2 constraint to our camera. So under add object constraint, we'll just put track 2 here. And this is normally what's done for you automatically when you use the track selected option. And then we just need to select the target object. Now we can click this to get a drop-down list of all the objects in our scene to select from, or we can use this super sweet eyedropper to just pick it from the stuff we see out in the 3D view, which is much more intuitive. So we'll click that, and we click here, and we see it says Object Suzanne. Yes, that's what we also want to track here. Notice immediately when we do that, the camera goes all crazy because it is not set up all nice and good the way that the tracking constraint is automatically set up for us when we use this camera option. So we'll have to do that manually. We'll just make sure these values are exactly the same as these up here. So we want -Z, and on the up axis we want Y. And now it's properly following this Suzanne head there. If we go back and press play, we can see the camera just following the Suzanne head and not following the cube at all. So to get the camera to first follow the cube and then follow the Suzanne head, what we're going to need to do is animate the influence values. So if we click back on the camera, we'll turn the influence of the Suzanne head tracking all the way down to 0, which basically means it won't be tracking that at all. And we'll make sure our timeline's back to 0. And then over this influence value, we'll press I to insert a keyframe for this influence value. Whenever you're animating a property, you have to use I to insert a keyframe rather than F. We can see that the value turned yellow, which means it has a keyframe for it. What we want to happen is for this influence to increase right as the Suzanne head's getting up near the cube here. And so what we would do is just increase this influence all the way up and then press I over this area again, which we can see inserts another keyframe. It's over here in our camera view. If we press play, we can see the camera following the cube at first, but then getting distracted and deciding to follow the Suzanne head.